Oh, guys, good, you hear? I am so excited. Guess what? I hope this isn't about your podcast again. Why, did you finally listen to it?
Da-da-da-da, 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 the Gloomy Next Door production. And now a message from our friends at Fetching Food.
The 1970s and 80s had Elbow, Gravy Train, Purina, Meow Mix, and Bell Bottoms. You've changed your clothes, now change how you feed your pet. Like Bell Bottoms, kick the kibble and join us in the 21st century with the healthiest diet for dogs and cats. Feed naturally, feed raw, feed Fetching Foods.
The Groomer Next Door podcast.
Dun, 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 dun.
I'm from Missouri. That's all I know.
Hello, pups and kittens, and welcome to another fun-filled and informative episode of the Groomer Next Door podcast. I'm your host, Chris Green, and joining us this week is an amazing man that I am so privileged and honored to have been able to talk to this week. Thanks to Dr. Lori Koger for making the introduction. We are lucky enough to be able to sit down with Dr. John Robb. If you know anything about vaccinations and the problems that's going on, you have heard of this veterinarian's name. He is amazing, and I would not have been able to get this done without Dr. Koger. So let's go into our fact of the week, which of course has to do with vaccinations. One size does not fit all. Did you know that a 160-pound Mastiff and a 10-pound Chihuahua both get the same amount of vaccine? Unlikely every other veterinary drug, 1 milliliter of vaccine is given to every dog, regardless of its size. I mean, when I first saw that, it's been, I want to say a year or two, but when I saw that, I was just like, that's impossible. My Akita should not get the same amount as my Chihuahua, and yet they do. And then, here's the next part that really just blows my mind, and that is we're forced by law to pump these poor pups with vaccinations, and they don't even need them. And, it's a simple and very simple reason why we can figure it out. A titer. Oh my gosh. And so I am just so glad to be able to have such an amazing person come here and just kind of shake my brain a little bit. By that sound, John is almost walking into the studio. So, with that said, Dr. John Robb, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, hello. Hold on a sec. Dad, we have a guest on the podcast.
Well, this week I'm going to fanboy a little bit, and I do apologize for that. I always get a kick out of having very intelligent people. I typically fanboy a little bit more when I have the super smart on, because then I'm able to, really learn something from you. This week we have Dr. John Robb. He is an amazing veterinarian. He is just the top of the top, and I have to thank Dr. Koger for making this introduction, because if it wasn't for her, I don't think we'd be sitting down to talk. So thank you for being on the podcast.
Oh, wow. Thank you, Chris. It's a wonderful introduction, and I'll try my best to live up to it.
You will not disappoint. I always like to start every conversation with, what's the origin story? How did Dr. Robb become Dr. Robb? What began, where was the middle, and how did we get here?
Well, I'll try to keep it short, and then you can highlight it. But basically, like many young vets or young people, I had an interest in being a veterinarian, and I pursued it hard and did what I had to do to get there, and graduated from UC Davis with a lot of knowledge and a desire to do good and help people and help pets. And unfortunately, when I got out there, I found that there were a lot of problems within my profession, and it seemed like money was the more important thing than the pets, and that really bothered me, because I didn't want to do things to make money, and especially if those things injured pets, and I didn't want to let money be something that stopped me from being able to help a pet. So I kind of went with what I thought was right, but what started happening, Chris, is I started being attacked by the profession. So I was just doing my own thing, but because it wasn't what they were doing, I began to be attacked, and my license was challenged and this stuff. And these are things that began 20, 25 years ago. I did things like have a community appreciation day where I would do free examinations and vaccines or whatever they needed. And the vets got very angry at me for doing this, and I didn't do it. And I invited them to come, but I did it to help out those who really didn't have a lot, and also to let people know who I was and where I was. But that brought the ear of many veterinarians against me. And then I was the first vet in the state of Connecticut to have a laser, which is a wonderful tool. I'm talking about a cutting laser to do surgery with. But again, they were all using scalpels, and I was a threat, so I became a dirty surgeon, and the board went after me on that, So, and then I started advertising in the newspapers, and back then that was unethical to put an ad in for a doctor to do that, or at least a veterinarian, and so I came under fire again. So all I can tell you is I was just doing things to get the word out and doing things to advance my profession, but what happens is there becomes an old boys school, and the old boys school is about the status quo, and if you step outside the lines, then they don't like it, and that's kind of what happened to me. And of course, how you do things in standards of care are not permanent things. We all know that what they did 100 years ago and considered the standard of care now would be, a lot of that would be considered malpractice, and the same will be true X amount of years from now. A lot of what the standard of care is right now will be considered malpractice in the future, and I can see those things. And so I'm gonna say it now. And of course, since I'm the minority, then they're going to attack me. But the truth, like you said when we talk personally, the truth is the important thing. If you're standing on the truth, go forward without fear. And I've done that. So I think I've gained the public attention because I was willing to put my license on the line for what I believed in, and I think that meant a lot to people.
That's, it's funny because advertising, you think nowadays you can look on Facebook and it's going to be all over there, but, that would have been, oh my gosh, just to put it in the newspaper, that's crazy. And a laser is so, it's less abrasive or even evasive, and there's just so many positives to it. I mean, these are all things that you look at now and you go, but that's just the standard of practice. That's what you do. And so it's like, oh my gosh, that's bizarre.
Right. Well, that's the thing. So when I first did it, no vet in Connecticut had a laser. I'm not sure how many were even on the East Coast, and so they felt threatened. See, that was the problem, and yet those same vets are, now it's been so many years, the sons or daughters of those vets have signs outside the hospital saying, we have laser surgery,
Mm-hmm.
So, but at that time, they felt threatened because they're using a scalpel. So that it's just change. And of course, but the bottom line is, I think when their income is coming from something that they do, and then somebody's saying, this is better, then they feel threatened, and they feel their income threatened, but they're not able to see deep enough to see that's what the real problem is, and so they attack you that whatever you're bringing forward really isn't good. It's bad, right? It's bad, and it won't do what you say it's going to do, and I guess because it didn't make sense to me at the time, but I've learned now, that. Like with the vaccine issues, if we touch on that, there's so much money is being made, and it's become such a way that it's become the standard of care to do things that really are malpractice, and yet now that we are exposing it, they want to hold on to that. But they have to look inside, because I don't think any vet really ever got into it except to do good, but somewhere along the way, the indoctrination process or the fear of not doing what everybody else is doing, starts to take over, and they become very jaded and angry if you try to change things, you know?
Yeah, no, I just think it's the common way of life. I mean, I would imagine it's just like any other profession. You're going to have jealousy and you're going to have competition, and I get that. It's just, that's just so hard for me to, I guess in my little brain, mine's saying, you guys are doctors and you have so much education and you're so much more advanced, I guess, is kind of the way I always look at it. I think a lot of people do. So you think that, oh, well, because they're so smart, they're not going to think of these petty little things. It does happen.
Yeah. Well, you know, the other thing, Chris, I want to make clear here is the majority of veterinarians are in bondage to the system, okay? They're in bondage to the system. In other words, you know, at some point, the veterinary establishment, when I say veterinary establishment, the leading organizations like the American Veterinary Medical Association and the American Animal Hospital Association, these national organizations that many vets belong to, and then, of course, the state organizations, the Connecticut Veterinary Medical Association, or whatever state, the Washington Veterinary Medical, these people who have more political power began to befriend the pharmaceutical industry more, and the money started coming in, and so there's these dominant people that are really a minority in power positions that have set the pace, and then you have the welcoming in of somebody like the Mars Corporation, it's clear they're only coming in to make a profit. It wasn't like, you know, Pamela Wright Mars' dog was sick and it was saved through great care, and she said, boy, I really want to help others. And no, they're coming in because candy is going out, sugar is bad for you, it's not recession proof, and they're looking to invest. And so dog food was a good way, and now veterinary medicine and veterinary products, because they are more recession proof, and also because the field of veterinary medicine is kind of like the Wild West with very little regulation and liability. So they're coming in. But the majority of veterinarians are in bondage and aren't happy with their plight, meaning quotas of how many things they have to sell and being on, you know, their payroll being based on production, so that they have that temptation to have to sell more and do more to make more, and the things that are coming into the profession. So these veterinarians, and then, of course, those who don't want to over-vaccinate, but they're working for somebody who does, or a corporation, and they're told to do it, and they kind of try to squirt it out, look the other way, whatever. But that's really what's happening. So the majority of vets are quiet. They're the silent majority, but they're in bondage to a system in fear of getting in trouble if they try to step outside. What I'm trying to do is get them to stand up. I didn't look for the problem came my way, but when my choice became to cave in and hide, which I was given an opportunity to do that, even with the state board, just to say, okay, go on a quiet probation for a year and just sign off here, I wouldn't do it, because I said, look, I got to live the truth, and whatever comes my way, I'm going to deal with it, but I'm going to live with John Robb. I'm going to be able to look in the mirror. I'm going to be able to go to sleep at night. I'm going to be able to know that I'm living the truth and doing my best. And so these veterinarians that are in bondage who want to have the same thing, they have to stand up. But the challenge is that they may have to go through some things. They may get fired from a job. They may come under, the veterinary board because of someone who's using them as their, bully machine to try to keep them in order, these kinds of things. So it'll get easier. But again, the more that stand up, Chris, the more that we will start to win. And so I believe that we will win, and vets are starting to stand up. But then the consumer has to drive the change even more so, the consumer, because they're the ones that are ultimately injured in terms of their pets and what we're supposed to be doing. So that's, it's just, like you said, it's hard to wrap your head around it, where people let money become their God, and it's those paper crimes where they're not necessarily having to see what's happening at the bottom. I'll tell you one quick story, and then I'll let you go back to, getting us moving in another direction. Or there's a veterinarian out there, Richard Ford, and he works for, Marielle, and he touts the vaccines, and he's well known, and, but he says that, they don't cause any harm, they're only good, but he'll make a different statement to different crowds. So one time I did a Facebook post where he said, titers do equal immunity, and then another one where he said they don't, and then I said to the public, and he says that all your stories are anecdotal. I said, well, the real Richard Ford, please stand up. And I put his number out there. I put his phone number out there, and he called me up because he was getting thousands of phone calls from very angry people whose pets had died from vaccinations, and he called me. He said, hey, we're colleagues, John. What are you doing? I said, listen, first of all, yes, we're colleagues, but you're my enemy. He goes, what are you talking about? I said, well, you're out there not telling people the truth. You work for a pharmaceutical company that's selling rabies vaccines, and you're telling veterinarians things that aren't true, and they're over-vaccinating and pets are dying. Then you're denying that it's happening, and you're making a living doing it. That's an enemy to what I'm doing, which is the opposite. He said, look, you care about pets, I care about people. And the truth is, I said, no, you don't care about either one. You care about the money. Now, I'm hoping Richard turns around from where he's at, but, there are people in high positions that are making very good money doing this, and I'm not trying to single him out. I'm not a perfect person either. But in my mind, I was giving him an opportunity to look at what's really happening at the bottom level when he got all those phone calls, right, from people some pets, it was so clear, got one rabies shot and were dead, and he's going to say it's an anecdotal story, and they're not happy to hear that. So, but anyway, so that's the establishment, and we've got to turn this thing around, and so that's what I'm trying to do.
Well, what's great about it is that a lot of pet parents, they're stuck in this part where they can't trust veterinarians. And then you have great veterinarians, and I'm very fortunate that I'm lucky enough to talk to all you guys that are great. And I'm like, no, there's actually good veterinarians out there who are looking to change what's, going on. But unfortunately, like you said, they're the silent ones that have to just go along for the ride because they don't want to jeopardize, A, their livelihood, or B, their practice. So that's challenging.
It is a challenge, and the hard part. Well, the amazing part. Let's start there. Is that if you do it right, you will actually attract more clients because you'll be trustworthy, and you can actually do far better financially than when you are doing things that are deleterious to the pets, but not admitting it and sounding good in the room. The truth always is there, and you're always, and plus the other thing with these vets that don't just do the right thing and stand up for it is they tend to not charge what they should for services that are really tough, like doing a tough surgery or a tough diagnostic situation, because they're making easy money doing things that they shouldn't, like selling, a lot of these, prescription diets and kibbles and that kind of stuff, so they're making a lot of money doing that, and then the vaccine issues as well, and then when they're out there doing a really tough surgery, they don't necessarily charge what they should because they honestly feel guilty about what they're doing, but they can't. It's all an internal struggle, and they don't know really how to take a look at themselves, because isn't that the most important thing, Chris, to really be able to see yourself for who you really are in the truth, and that's why they get so angry when you bring up these subjects, because they can't look inside, so they've got to attack what's out there. You know what I mean? And I understand all this, and that's why I'm not inflammatory on when I'm talking to vets, or when I'm Facebook posting or LinkedIn or whatever, wherever I'm communicating. I'm not inflammatory because I kind of know in that area who they are and what's really driving them. So I don't, when they attack me and say things against me that aren't true, I don't really take it personally. and I try to continue the conversation to try to get to something real. And the best way I've been able to do that is when I can get them to give me a phone call where the world's not watching, it's just you and me talking, because that's when everything changes, because nobody's going to judge you, and now we can have a real conversation and we can open up a little bit, So I've been able to, there are vets who have been very tough on me online, but got into a conversation and then gave them some information that they weren't germane to, and then it all stopped. And but the challenge, Chris, comes if they really admit what we're saying is true. Now, what do? Like if you're talking about nutrition, right, and they really realize that people should be preparing their own food for their pets and getting fresh ingredients and feeding them healthy stuff where they know where it came from. Now, what am I doing with that lobby full of all that stuff on the shelves that I'm selling every day? Right.
Right.
I would have to take it down. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I would have to take 10% out of my income. So it hit home, right? But
it does.
But they don't. But you see, the whole thing with veterinarians. This is where the profession is really screwed up. They could make very good money being doctors.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have to sell all these pharmaceutical drugs and all this dog food. All they have to do is be a doctor, and that means, in a lot of cases, to help a sick animal get well again, right? I mean, that's what we think of doctors, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in the old days, doctors, it really wasn't so much about wellness, right? It was more about a doctor came in when there was sickness and there was a healing needed. Mm-hmm. That's when doctors came in. And that's what I foresee in the hospitals that I plan on putting up to see. There'll be places for healing, There's a place for wellness, too. Don't get me wrong. A lot of people, they don't know that they should be brushing the teeth, and they certainly can't hear that their dog has an early heart murmur or something. There's a place for wellness where pets who appear well get looked at and get advised about ways to keep them well or find problems that aren't so evident yet, But really, I think most of what veterinary medicine should be about is when the pets are sick and need help, to come to the doctor for that.
Very much agreed. It's funny because I go to different vets. I go to two. My personal vet and one we use for our rescues. And I see all this food that's up there, and I laugh because I'm like, garbage, garbage, garbage. And then I look at it and go, candy company, what do you have in your candy? Sugar. What's in that food? Sugar. Oh, that's a good idea. Let's put that in there. It's just, it drives me insane. And I get it, there's a business for it. And it's a hard one to deal with. And I don't even have the DVM at the end of my name, but I'm looking at it going, here's all the things wrong with this food. How is it that I know you guys see it, but, I understand it's a business.
Well, it's so indoctrinated. I mean, yesterday I was in the exam room with a client, and, the dog, had some issues, and it was an older dog, and the issues were gastrointestinal. The dog didn't want to eat and was vomiting occasionally, and the dog was pretty bright and alert otherwise, and so, I forget what they were feeding. It was probably Benefil or something, and so I said to him, these dog foods are really not good for the pet. And they looked at me like I had three heads,
Mm-hmm.
And I said, you really should be preparing your dog's food. And they just were like, almost their jaw dropped, because they just couldn't get it, because they were so believing that dogs have to eat food that's prepared and called dog food. And people can eat fresh meat and fresh vegetables, but dogs, no, they have to eat things that you buy that are processed for them, because they have the vitamins and they have all the stuff that you're told by veterinarians and whoever, right? So, but these people, they just left the room shaking their head going, is this veterinarian nuts? What? But that's what you're up against now, So now I'm blessed so far to work with this boss who sells all the wrong stuff and does all the wrong things, but I can go in the room and tell him the opposite. And so far, he's not saying anything to me,
That's good.
So I'm good at the moment, but but that's the deal. So, but the veterinarians, I mean, I don't know why people don't get it. I think it's tough because maybe the cause and effect is not so quick sometimes, that they just don't get it, So I'm not sure.
It's funny because 20 years ago, and I hate to even think that the 90s were 20 years ago, but 20 years ago we were told that fast food was bad for us. But as a kid, we ate it, and 20 years in advance, there are adults who ate fast food then who are continuing to eat fast food. They're not getting proper exercise. And yet, what is the cause of a human who is eating garbage? Obesity. And how many health issues come along with that? But then they don't realize that, oh, hey, you know what? That's going to be the same thing for my dog and cat, and yet it's completely oblivious. The same thing with vaccinations. How many times do you hear people are saying, I'm not going to vaccinate my kid. I don't want to put all that chemicals in my child. Same thing applies with a dog and cat. I just kind of throw my hands in there going, wait, this is all the same. The only thing that's different is one we consider property, which I hate that terminology for dogs and cats, and the other is a family member because it's a child.
Right.
It shocks me.
Yeah. So, it's really amazing, and as you touch on that, then we get into the broader subject of people who are just running. They're not running their own life. They're just running, and they're and what are they living for? And then of course, because it's so clear that if you don't eat the proper foods and you don't exercise, like you say, you're going to start running into some pretty serious medical conditions much earlier than you would if you took care of yourself. And I don't know about you, Chris, but when I'm sick, the world stops, and I want to avoid sickness as much as I can, and yet, when I was talking to a doctor when I recently had some GI issues, it turns out I ate duck eggs, and I didn't know I was allergic to duck eggs. It probably has to do with some vaccine I had at some point, whether they use duck embryo or something. But anyway, I was in the hospital, and I was talking to this doctor, and I said, "What's it like in your profession?" And she knows. She said, "I know that people need to exercise and they need to eat properly. And yes, there's a constant push for me to sell pharmaceuticals as a doctor. Yes, there's freebies, there's all kinds of things. But she said, but the problem really is that people have now gotten to a point where they want a pill for everything. They come in wanting a pharmaceutical. They've lost sight of, like what you said, of eating properly and exercising, and they just let themselves go. And then when they get sick, they think they could just go in and there's a magic pill that's going to make them better, And she said, so there's a mindset. It's not just the mindset, but I guess they've been able to either, indoctrinate people to the pharmaceutical mindset, or it's just a situation where people are being lazy and not taking care of themselves personally, and therefore end up in those kinds of situations. And because it's just a shame. It's a shame because you're kind of watching people dying all around you in slow motion, if you think about it, that's what you're watching. And it's a sad story to see,
It is, and it's so bizarre because you're I'll take it to another level, and that's my wife will watch my 500-pound life or something like that, where there's morbidly, I think there's probably another term for it, but the massively morbidly obese, and they're bedridden, and they go see this one doctor in Houston, and they want the gastric bypass, and it's like almost in a sense the miracle pill, even though I understand it's not, but it's let's take all of this out, let's not exercise much, and let's just get it all sucked out with a vacuum and put a little staple in me so that I can't eat much, and I'll be fine. It's just like, hey, look at the dogs that are exactly in the same spot, morbidly obese. They're maybe 8 years old, which you'll hear the pet parents say, "Oh, well, he's old. 8 years old's old? Really?
Yeah.
Oh, well, look at the cloudiness in his eyes, and he's fat and old." That's really not an answer. And you kind of shake your head. I mean, from my end, it is sad. It is. And then, we get the same question of, "Oh, my dog has dandruff." "No, that's flaky skin." "Well, what causes it?" "Bad nutrition." "What do you feed him?" "Oh, I'm on a great diet. I have Purina." And I love how they put the French twist on it, like it's actually going to make it any better. Like, no, and being in the Midwest, it's even more of an uphill battle because we've yet to actually have the West Coast, East Coast crush where the changes happened. I mean, everybody's an old Roy Purina type feeder in this part of the country, and you're just like, come on, folks, this is not good.
Right. No, I hear you. I think with, to me, really it comes down to, and this may sound strange with people, and I'm not pointing my finger at anybody because there's no perfect people out there, including myself, okay? I think people's responsibility is to improve in their lives, to become more compassionate and to grow. That's all of our responsibility, But really we're talking about a lot of mental illness. That's what we're really talking about here, and it's sad because people who aren't living for the things that they should be, which is, I may sound kind of drippy here, but it's about serving others. It's about caring about other people and imparting good into other people and their lives, and it usually means at the expense of yourself, that you have to do something, that you lose something in order to do this. But when we do that, I don't know about you, but that's what makes me feel good, when I'm able to do that and somebody says, you really helped me. And I didn't get any money and I didn't get any fanfare and it's not going to be written up in a paper, but I feel good. I feel good and I can say I accomplished. Or even things like going out and painting the fence and when you finish looking and going, I painted that fence. I did something good, I mean, even things like that, people need to do good and they need to feel good for doing it. And when that's not happening enough, then they're not able to feel good about who they are as a person, and they begin to find crutches, and some of those things end up being addictions, and they don't take care of themselves, and it's kind of a downward spiral. And then you see, it's very sad when I look out and see people that have let themselves go. And I know this one man who's done it so much through smoking and food addictions and different things, and he's kind of coming back, but he's got heart problems and all this, and he's saying, well, yeah, I'm an old man now, and he's like in his early 60s. Well, to me, he's an old man because he didn't take care of himself, and he should be vibrant still and out there, So I'm a big one on, people being take care of themselves and understand why we're here, which is to impart good into somebody else's life. That's why we're here, So in my profession, as a veterinarian, that's what I want to do every day in that room, and so there's going to be a little money transaction because we all, need to make a living in order to take care of ourselves. But it's pretty sad, the state of affairs in a lot of areas. And the good and evil battle is going to go on forever because it's just the nature of our time here on this earth, But I do believe, here's the good news, Chris, I do believe we're in a time of restoration. I really believe that. I believe our country is in a time of restoration, and I even believe the world is in a time of restoration. I can feel it, and I think we're kind of those who have made money their god, like a company like Mars, that they're not going to be around that much longer, that we're going to take back, and we're going to start to have, companies that look to impart good and then do well, and those that, we're just about the money are going to start to go away. So that's the good news. And then more people will be healthy, more people will be living the dream and getting something good done in this world. I think that's where we're heading.
I do too. And, it's funny because you look at it all, and it's almost kind of the old way is starting to kind of melt away. And different things that were just everyday life, it's not like that anymore. Some things that you kind of wish were, I'm not going to say that there's some things you kind of go, gosh, I miss those days. But for the most part, I think we have changed. Yeah, I think that people have changed. And I think that with, even though smartphones have been around for 10 years now, I think people are starting to finally understand, oh, wow, I have a library at my fingertips. I can actually read what's going on, where we couldn't before.
Right. Yeah, no, that's a good point. That's a good point. We're so much more connected in the information. But again, you have to have a center for truth in order to be able to get through the propaganda and the lies and find what's real. That's the tough part. And I'm not a big one to push my faith, but my faith is what drives me. My spiritual beliefs. And I guess I'd call myself a Christian, but I don't always do that because for one person that will mean one thing, and for another it'll mean something else, because of who walks in that name at times. But for me, that's really what my life is about kind of living my calling. I believe everybody has a calling, and it's up to them to find their calling and then to live it, and living your calling in a world that's oftentimes, living for the wrong things. You're going to be persecuted. It's not necessarily going to be a clean run. In fact, I can almost guarantee it's not. But if you stay true and you walk in love again, and you have the best interests of the person in front of you, whether they're a friend or an enemy, right?
Right.
That's when real change comes, and that's where I find myself. But like you said, when we were much younger, I mean, I never judge people because everything that they're doing wrong now, I did wrong before,
Right.
And honestly, I'm probably doing some things wrong now that I don't even know it yet, but I'll figure it out eventually, So there's no perfect people, but there should be something inside of us that wants to get better at what we do, and then whatever our calling is. In my case, at this point, it's being a veterinarian, to do something for my profession in that direction, So
now, you kind of undersell just being a veterinarian, but not only are you a veterinarian, but you're a veterinarian who actually sees a little bit more of the science than majority, and I'm going to say the majority, because you're the one who stands up and says, hey, look, these vaccinations have a lot longer shelf life inside these dogs and cats than what we're actually being forced, and I use air quotes for that, to tell pet parents. And, we were talking about this, about a week or so ago when we were going back and forth, and, you were kind of telling a little bit of the story of how this whole titer came about, and I was just, I've been amazed by the process. And so how did this whole process of, hey, let's do a titer to actually prove the facts, and instead of just believing, oh, this vaccination needs every year, but it actually should be 3 to 5 years, but we're telling them every year to come in. How did the titer idea come through?
Well, it's really, and this is where any layperson can win in their argument with a veterinarian, because for me, where it came through was the fact that veterinarians titer themselves for rabies. We are all subjected to getting a rabies vaccine when we're in veterinary school. It's almost just accepted as it's part of the requirements, because you're going to get out there and you're going to work with animals, some of which are going to have rabies, okay? And so, I mean, I can tell you that in 1991, my technician came out of the room and said, this lady's here with this dog that's acting real weird, and it just came over and bit my leg, And I went in the room, and it was a puppy, and it ended up being rabid. You know, it was born under the back porch, and a raccoon probably bit it, and exposed a lot of people, and it was rabid. It was a rabid dog. It was only a 18-week-old puppy. So the point is, we veterinarians are vaccinated in vet school because we will at some point be in contact with a rabid animal. And so, but we don't give ourselves another vaccine unless our circulating antibodies are below the accepted threshold, which is 0.1 international units per mil. So all veterinarians get vaccinated for rabies, and all veterinarians do titers on themselves to see if they need another shot or they're good. I mean, that's just how it is. So then why doesn't that apply to the animals? I mean, if the science is different for humans than it is for a dog or cat, and of course the truth is, no, it's not at all. It's not. And so there's where you win, because that's the truth. So why is this lie being perpetuated that you can't check a titer in a pet, or so it's like the cigarette industry, Chris. We're slowly winning because, there was a time where if you go back to the 50s and you watch movies with Cary Grant or any of those folks, they all got a cigarette in their hand.
Yep.
Everybody's smoking cigarettes, and it was cool, and it was gentlemanly, and it was womanly, and they were all killing themselves. And like John Wayne, they're going to die from lung cancer, but it was cool, and they didn't know, And then when they started figuring out that all these people dying of lung cancer had one thing in common, they smoked cigarettes, but the cigarette industry denied it, and they tried to hold on to that money as long as possible, even though it was so obvious what was going on, So the same thing is happening. We know as veterinarians we titer ourselves because we know that we're protected. We also know, I'll give you such a prime example. Link Wellborn. Link Wellborn was the president of the American Animal Hospital Association, and he's the head of the vaccine task force that puts out AAHA's vaccine recommendations, okay? When Mars terminated me so they could steal my hospital and reported me to the state board because I was lowering my volume for smaller pets, there was a court case that ensued. Mars hired Link Wellborn, Dr. Link Wellborn, Veterinarian of the Year, President of AAHA, head of the vaccine task force, to testify against me. When I had him up on the stand and to cross-examine, because I was going pro se, I was representing myself, I said, Dr. Wellborn, do you check a titer on yourself for rabies? He said, yes. I said, why don't you just get a rabies shot every 3 years? He said, because I don't want to get sick. That's what he said. I said, so you then know that the titer means that you're immune and you don't need another shot, right? You believe in that? He said, yes. I said, what do you do with your pets in the exam room? I give them a shot. Why? It's the law.
Mm-hmm.
It's the law. So he knows. But I said, but you're the head of the vaccine task force. You're the one who should be changing that law because you know the truth. And then there's a silence there, right? Because he's corrupt. He knows it's the truth. He's head of the vaccine task force. He's a member of the AVMA, but he's not doing anything to change the law. So there you go. So he knows that a titer equals immunity, but he's saying it's not my job to change the law, but you're a veterinarian, and you have an oath that says do no harm, and you're doing harm to your patients because it's the law, and you are in a position to change the law. So I hold him a little bit more accountable because he's not using a position, but guess what, Chris? If he did use his position to try to change the law, he would be kicked off the vaccine task force, So he's going to stay where he is, and he's not going to change anything. Now, when you get down to veterinarians just practicing at the bottom of the situation, right, they aren't exposed to this information, right? They aren't exposed to this information, but because they try to keep this information out of the mainstream journals and those types of things, right? And it's a slow process. But we now are at a point, right, where we have VaxiCheck in-house diagnostic testing for titers for distemper parvo, which is a quick 5-minute test. And about 20% of the hospitals are now titer testing. And that percentage was only 10%, 10 years ago, so it's going up. So the truth is titers do equal immunity. We shouldn't be giving these vaccines if they have immunity. To me, it's medical malpractice to do that. But the process of change is slow, and it's coming. And that's all I can tell you. Now, myself, how I got involved was simply because I knew it was true. It wasn't happening around me, but I was seeing the dogs getting sick from the over-vaccination, and I just knew intuitively, just like you and I are vaccinated mumps, measles, and rubella, but we don't go in and get another shot every 3 years because these vaccines are pretty much lifelong immunity. So it just doesn't make sense. It would be one thing for the human being and another thing for the dog, but we're both mammals with 2 kidneys, a heart, right? 4 limbs, et cetera, et cetera. So it's just a situation that it's a very sad situation because the truth is so obvious, and anybody intelligent, Chris, like anybody intelligent, should have this conversation and then immediately start titering and stop over-vaccinating. But the love of money corrupts many. That's all I can tell you.
It always shocks me that it's quote-unquote the law, but what the law isn't there to harm, it's there to protect. So it's kind of one of those, and I've had this question mark for this particular law for the longest time of, well, as far as I know, even if, now I've heard one of the others, I've heard, yes, this is true, and no, this isn't true, but I've heard if you get the reports for a titer from a vet, they can just simply mark it down that your dog or cat, mostly dog, but is vaccinated, and it's good for another year. I've also heard, no, you still have to get the shot. And I think to myself, well, why can't you decline that option? I mean, it's so bizarre. And then shouldn't we have in the law saying that if a titer's done and comes off that the dog is actually immune, that doesn't need the shot, and that's more of a protection towards the animal? It's just bizarre to me.
Chris, it's bizarre. Chris, you're right. I can only tell you it's bizarre because the truth is plain to see, and it should be exactly like you say. And, let's assume it started out for the right reasons. The first rabies vaccine was given in the Philippines by believe it or not, a missionary named Dr. Barron. Now, Dr. Barron was a veterinarian in the late 60s who was sent to the Philippines as his missionary position, but he happened to be a veterinarian with immunology training. And in the Philippines at that time, there were many children getting rabies from the feral dog population on the island. So he worked with a pharmaceutical company, developed the first rabies vaccine for dogs, and began to vaccinate dogs on the island. And they pretty much got rid of rabies in the Philippines. And so when he came back to the United States in the early 70s, he was a member of the AVMA, and they began to vaccinate here in this country. Now, there are a couple things to know there. Number one, on an island like that, and there's a feral population of dogs, and also a lot of poor folks who, the dogs run wild, they breed, there's no real, stay and neuter type programs. All the dogs are usually about the same size, right? But in the United States, the dogs were more breed related. One person has a golden, one has a Chihuahua, and of course now we've gone more and more towards the smaller breeds for, people living in cities and things like that. So the point is, when you come back and get started on 1 cc for all dogs every year for rabies, I think at that point it was based on what they knew, and it was reasonable. It was reasonable because rabies did occur in the U.S. and people did die from it, so it was reasonable. But then, as time went on, and how titering became known, and also studies where the smaller pets were having more reactions than the bigger pets, and studies where the titers were higher for the smaller pets and the bigger pets all getting 1 cc. That's the point where it should have been, okay, now we've come up with this 1 cc for everybody every year, but there's a way of checking to see if those pets have immunity or not, the titer, so why don't we start employing that? Now, wait a minute. We can get a much higher titer with a smaller dog, so can we lower the volume a little bit on the smaller dogs and still get a protective titer? Well, there we've done a study. There we go. There we can do that. And it should have gone in the direction of, we still rabies vaccinate, but we vaccinate in order to produce a titer, and we measure the titer, and we don't revaccinate unless they need it. That's where it should have gotten if it followed its normal course. So it started in the right path. It should have continued in the right path, but there was a change in this country. There was a change, I have to tell you. The morals declined. Money became God. People started, there was a time where you worked for one employer for your life, You had your retirement with him, and you had a pension, and you worked hard, and you were secure, and you raised your family in one town, in one school, and people knew each other. But the world changed, and people now, you offer me $1 more an hour, I'll go work for you. The loyalty's lost, on both sides. This is part of the decline in the morals of people. And so along with that decline is making adjustments based on current science that comes along. And that's why you see what you do, Chris. But you're right, it dumbfounds you because, the science is clearly there, the truth is clearly there, there's a double standard in how a veterinarian treats themselves and then their patient right there in the exam room. And yet, here we are trying to right this wrong and coming up. I mean, we've had 5 states with legislation introduced, and so we're getting there. But what happens is, the AVMA sends in their folks. The public health veterinarians have this compendium out there that says that titers can't be used because there's other factors that influence them, but the data that they're using to support is from articles from 20 years ago and people making conclusions that didn't even do the research, and there's all this debauchery in there but they walk into the public health department when we're trying to get a law passed and they swear on their britches that a titer will cause the deaths of many young people because it's not accurate, and then all these pets won't be vaccinated correctly, and then people will get rabies again. And then you have the legislators going, well, then of course we can't do that. But it's a lie, and that's how they perpetuate it. So it's crazy. It's crazy. But this is where we're at. But we keep going because we have the truth, and because, like I said, morals are coming back. So we're going to win, and we just have to keep up the fight until we get there.
I still think that the reason why things have made such an advance and why minds have changed is really the development of the smartphone. Because you look and you go, well, the tablet's the same thing. No. The tablet didn't come around until 2010. The smartphone was out for a few years. And, you can go back and say, well, people had computers. People didn't use computers like they do now. It wasn't the same kind of world. I mean, and this is even weird to even think about it, but I mean, I'm thinking back, I have a 9-year-old, almost 10-year-old, and her way of doing book reports is completely different. I mean, there is no read the book and then write a 2-page summary. It's on a tablet, and they just ask a multitude of questions. I think to myself, how easy is that? I mean, great times. Same thing with watching TV. We would have to get up early on Saturday morning to watch cartoons if we were into that, and I was. So I'd have to get up early. Nowadays, you can just hit DVR and record everything.
Right. Well, you are making a good point in that, for instance, me, John Robb, as one person in a small town in Connecticut, being able to reach millions of people out there, has come through the smartphone. So you're absolutely right, because I could have never reached so many people and continue to without the device. But having said that, I don't know that the smartphone per se, right, makes things better, because as with any technology, it can be used for good or it can be used for evil. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So it's only as smart as the person pushing the button. And
I like that. Yes.
But it does allow. See, now in this here, I'll agree with you in this. I mean, I'm agreeing with what you're saying, but let's just put a little emphasis in one area. You have the veterinary establishment, which is about 40,000 strong, and then you have the pet owners in the U.S. I'm just talking U.S. right now, but this could be extrapolated. Then you have the pet owners in the U.S. that are 200 million strong. Now, give both a smartphone with access to the same information, and we win. You see what I mean? Mm-hmm. And we win because we can be educated, and we don't have to rely on those 40,000 to educate us. We can find the information for ourselves. So I agree with you. Because of that, we can drive the change to make things better. Absolutely.
You know, it's funny because I'm going to put this in two categories that honestly make up the same, but you know, you go to WebMD because you have some symptoms or your dog has symptoms, and you go up there, and you know, obviously it's just a computer app, really, and it's going to give a theory of what you personally have or your dog or cat has, and let's be realistic, it's not always going to be accurate. So right. you may actually Google your WebMD your symptoms, and you come back with some extravagant disease when really it's nothing major, and you're I'm going to die tomorrow. And I imagine that a lot of pet parents go into veterinarians and go, my dog is exhibiting these symptoms, they must have X, Y, Z, and you look and go, yeah, no, that's not it. It's really just a nutritional problem or whatnot, or even vaccination problem. And you know, that's where technology, it hurts, you know, and it will hurt. And like you said, it's definitely on the user opposed to the actual device. The device has the facts. The person, well, we're humans. I mean, we're prone to, you know, make mistakes and prone to, you know, misjudge what we're doing.
Yeah, well, I like, you know, they used to say Dr. Google. I like right. I like consumers to research on their own. I really do. I feel the educated consumer is the best consumer.
Yes.
And so I think it's important for them. Obviously, like you said, you know, people are going to make mistakes when they don't have all the facts, plug in symptoms, and it gives possibilities, and they self-diagnose, especially mm-hmm. if they take it to the level of not getting the care they need properly, mm-hmm. and there's a delay based on that. So it can be bad if you have people that, you know, go farther than they should with it. But for people, like you said, that are intelligent and use it intelligently, they can gather a lot of good information, and they can sometimes, I mean, I'll be honest with you, I've had people come in with the diagnosis, and they got it because they used Dr. Google, and they're smart, and they did a lot of research online, and they figured out what was wrong with their dog, and they were right on with it when they came into the exam room, and I was amazed, you know, amazed. And then we did the testing to support what they came up with. So I'm a big fan of it, you know, and I listen to clients when they come in, and if they bring in articles and stuff, I want to look at them, and I want to see if it supports their position, and so we should be able to work together. You know, it shouldn't be but again, there you go with the veterinary establishment, where when you look at these, articles within the journals and the economic journals in veterinary medicine, they always knock Dr. Google. And how do you deal with these people that use the internet as if it's a bad thing? And that's just the wrong thing to do. They take an adversarial position. And again, this is the veterinary establishment, because, you know, these journals are controlled by a select group of people. It's just the way it is, you know. And it's a problem. And that's another thing I want to establish with the Protect the Pets movement. I mean, I foresee veterinary hospitals around the country. I foresee that Protect the Pet symbol to be the good housekeeping symbol, that when you see it on a pet care product, you can trust it, or a veterinary hospital, you can trust it. I also foresee veterinary schools that are Protect the Pets, and I also see a new veterinary medical association that is Protect the Pet vets. Now, I would be happy to stop anywhere along the line as I go forward to try to establish these things, if we can get the current establishment to come to their senses and start to, you know, put the pet's care first and allow veterinarians to live their oath. You know, I would be happy to give up what I see necessary to be done to fix the situation, which is to create something better than what's out there. But if they continue where they're going, then I'm just going to have to go forward and accomplish that, you know. But if they change, then I'd be glad to work within the system to right the wrongs and give people what they need in pet care. But either way, I'm going to keep going, you know.
Now, that brings up a very good point, and that is, how did Protect the Pet start?
It started in 2006 when, I was studying to be a better business owner, and I was following Robert Kiyosaki, who wrote a book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and that book is about, economics and how people can become an entrepreneur versus an employee. And he always said, it's not better to be an employee or better to be an entrepreneur. It's just you should have the choice to do what you want to do and then decide which side you want to be on. So I started studying because I want to be a better veterinarian by running my business better. And I, came home from that. I did Anthony Robbins, he's a great motivator, and Scott Peck, and, all these people out there who seem to had attained a following and were teaching people things. And so I was trying to learn, and then, I talked to my wife because we had basically been the Americans who put away for retirement every year, your IRA, your $2,000 a year, and then you got your retirement plans from work and all these kinds of things that everybody did so that we could all have that same lifestyle when we're 70 or now 65 or whatever, and we retired. I was doing all that. But then one day I heard this voice say, "Work for me and retire in heaven," So I talked to my wife, and we took all of our money, which I can't tell you exactly how much it was, but I think it was approaching $700,000 at the time, and we took all of it out. We sold all our life insurance policies, took all our money, and we started the Protect the Pets movement. And I, worked with a guy named Daryl Ort, who was a website developer, and he helped me develop the website. He helped me develop the symbol, Protect the Pets. I told him what the problem was in veterinary medicine. We got hospitals to join the movement and gave them materials, and I started writing a book, and I started writing a business plan to put pet hospitals all over the country, and then we ran out of money in about 3 years.
Wow.
and so, but I didn't stop, and I didn't make anything either. So, and then eventually I bought a Banfield because I wanted to kind of really learn what the enemy was doing, So I bought a Banfield franchise, and then Mars came in right at the same time and bought Banfield. So all of a sudden everything changed, and they defranchised, and they got rid of all the franchises by pressuring them that they go after their license, and they did that with me. But I stood up against them, and so that's when Protect the Pets began to become visible out there, because when they terminated me, that's when I joined Facebook in 2012. That's when I joined LinkedIn. That's when I became active in social media to get the message out, and at some point I ended up in front of the public health department, and I, testified, and somebody taped it, and then Ravi Habib massaged it, and then that video went to, I think, 37 million so far, So that's when Protect the Pets started to really take off, and now I'm kind of recovering from coming off of food stamps and state health insurance, because it took a toll, 5 different courtrooms and all the things that I went through standing up. But now I'm coming back, and I'm starting to get ready to put the first Protect the Pets hospital out there. I've got the book off to publishers, trying to find somebody who will publish it, and I'm working as a veterinarian a few days a week. So things are heading the other way, and that's the story of Protect the Pets. So we're kind of in the middle, but sometimes you have to put your money where your mouth is, so to speak, right? Mm-hmm. And I have to give my wife credit because she encouraged me to do it. And I'll be honest, when I put that money out there, I expected a quick return, but that didn't happen, and it didn't happen because I didn't have enough money to do it as big as I wanted, and also because I really wasn't focused on making money. I was focused on educating consumers, That I have a website. People could still see it if they looked it up. It's called Protect the Pets Original. They have put the word original.com. and they can see the website I put up in 2006, and it's all about educating pet owners, what questions to ask veterinarians so that you can find out if it's a pet-safe hospital or not, I gave, the inside story. I put up a code of conduct for veterinarians that they should follow if they wanted to be a protected pets vet, so it really wasn't set out to make any money. It was more about education, which is why it didn't. But now I'm at the point where I want to get the hospitals out there and other things. And at some point, I'll derive an income from it. But like I told you earlier, sometimes you follow your dream and then that comes later,
Yeah. I first thing is, I didn't know Banfield was a franchised medical facility. I always thought they were just owned by Mars. So you just kind of told me something. I had no idea.
No, Scott Campbell started it. Banfield is a road or a street in Oregon, and there was a hospital there called Banfield the Pet Hospital, and Scott Campbell started working for the gentleman who started it, and then somebody started into a company called VetSmart, which put a few hospitals inside the PetSmart stores. This goes back, I'm thinking, early 90s, and then Scott Campbell bought those and started establishing more of them, and he had about 2/3 of them were more company owned, but he liked 1/3 of them to be the franchises because, people who own a franchise put a little bit more intelligence, I won't say, put a little bit more effort into looking how to make it better because they get more for doing it, And then somebody who owns a business is going to be more interested in the business growing and being successful than somebody who works there. It's just the nature of the beast. And so he believed in the franchises, and I bought one, and I was doing very well. And I didn't do everything the way he wanted it done, but he was okay with it because the money was good, and they were getting good ideas from me on how to do things differently. Then Mars bought, and then Mars defranchised. Mars is a very controlling company, and they got rid of all 250 franchises in just 5 years, and I watched them it's horrible what they did to veterinarians. I mean, they were people who had owned them for years, had lots of years left on their contracts. They just bullied them in, but they would offer about 1/3 of what it was worth, and for some people that might not even be a year's salary. So, but if you didn't take it, then they would make it clear that they were going to go after your license. And so most veterinarians just sold and got out and ran away, and opened up. And that's what they told me. They said, look, with this money, you can go up and up another hospital. Granted, you might make not as much as you could, but at least we're giving you a way out. And I said, yeah, but I got 15 years left on my contract here. I'm not going anywhere. I'm making good money. I'm abiding by my contract, so get out. And of course, they arrested me and goes from there, So, that's the deal. That's who they are, and that's why I know just how bad they are because I was doing good when they did this to me, So I know just who Mars is,
It's funny. I'm not. I always make it clear about my soapbox moment. I can't stand going into any big box store, whether it's any of them, whether it's a pet store or a people store that has pet food. Anytime I get near the pet food, I cringe. And going into PetSmart, it's kind of like the best analogy is think of Superman to Kryptonite. That's kind of how I feel every time. I almost kind of fall to my knees and stagger around. And we have one in town. I'm waiting for them to find out that I do this podcast and not want the nonprofit that we volunteer with want me part of it because obviously I don't say nice things about what pet food has in it. But we don't have a Banfield, which I thought was strange because they have grooming there, and a lot of the money that comes in, and I hate to say this, but it's the truth, a lot of money Banfield would bring in was from grooming.
Yeah, no, well, there's various reasons for that. I mean, you can only expand so fast, and a lot of how they dealt with the franchisees is when there was so much trouble, they would just close the store completely. They'd take the Banfield out and leave that PetSmart without a Banfield. probably thinking to go back in later and put one back. So, there's a lot of reasons why one store might or might not. Now, of course, Mars owning Banfield is 2008. That's when they owned it. So they've pretty well got it rolling now, 10 years into it. Now, VCA, right, which they just bought last year, they're just the beginning of a process where there'll be a lot of people leaving VCA because they don't line up, and then other people coming in to take over, and their agenda is starting to be pushed there as well. They're on the move, and then Blue Pearl they bought, which is another place. Now, PetSmart is not owned by Mars. In fact, the original deal that Scott had with PetSmart, Scott Campbell, was that the PetSmart would get, I can't remember I think it was 5% ownership in Banfield. Now, I don't know what happened to that when Mars bought, if that was negotiated, if it's still the same. But they were connected financially back at that time with PetSmart owning some of Banfield, okay? But the relationship there is a contractual relationship. But, there's a small amount owned by PetSmart, but basically Banfield rents from PetSmart. So they're two separate corporations. But I know PetSmart a few years back changed ownership as well. So I don't know the exact dynamics of what they're doing together, but when two corporations work together, they can be conflict also, and so I don't know the dynamics, but now of course you've got Petco, right? Now Petco, right? And now they've just begun to put veterinary hospitals into Petcos now. So that's the new thing you're going to see. Petco for years did Love My Pet initially, where they just held those vaccine clinics within their pet stores on Saturdays and Sundays for 4 hours each day. Now they've renamed it, I think it is now called Vetco. But now Vetco has become veterinary hospitals inside of Petco stores, so they're going to start to compete with PetSmart in that area. So there's a lot going on at that end. And like I said, my dream is to do the opposite. I mean, I'd love to have a pet store that helps people to, understand veterinary nutrition, sold some pet nutritional products that were viable and good, but encourage people to also, feed raw, cook your own, this type of thing. There's room for both, but the problem is that, the money right now is in the indoctrination of people to feel that they have to feed their pets prepared dog food, and that's been prepared by companies in advance to get the right amount of vitamins in there and to have it be balanced, right?
It's comical because, when in the whole previous conversation we were having, you were talking about franchisees. I was thinking of the movie The Founder. I don't know if you saw that with Michael Keaton, who played the founder of McDonald's. And, it really kind of, in a sense, really laid everything on the line of what you were saying on how franchisees can actually care about a product. And, I was thinking, wow. And then I'm always kind of come to this point of idiocracy when it comes to the fact of we can learn so much, but we choose not to. And I just, with all of this, you walk into a big box store, especially a pet store, and there's aisle after aisle after aisle of just the worst possible things out there to feed your dogs and cats. And then, I kind of chuckle because then you have a clinic in there as well. It's a one-stop shop. Here, feed this garbage, go see a veterinarian who will then prescribe this, and I use air quotes for everything, but air quote, an actual quality pet food, which, could be by any of the companies that actually should be the model of every standard bag of pet food, but it's not, of course. And then charge the person $80, $90, $100 a bag, when in fact, I feed 2 Akitas, and they're on raw. And it's cheaper than if I actually bought a bag of prescription dog food. And I think to myself, and what are the benefits to it? There's 1,000,001 benefits to feeding raw, but to even prescription dog food, there's no benefit. I mean, I can get everything by making my own food, or at least if you can't make it. And this is the big thing I always tell people, if you don't have the time, and that's understandable. There's a lot of great companies out there. I always have at the beginning of mine a friend of mine who has a company called Fetching Foods. I always tell people, go through him. If you can't make it yourself, here's somebody who makes all this stuff themselves, and it's quality. But don't just trust these pet food companies to say, well, we're making everything that's biologically correct for your dog and cat. Trust us. Here, we'll sell you a bag, a 50-pound bag for $20, and it will sustain your dog or cat perfectly. That's a load of crap. The only thing really that's viable on that bag is the bag itself. It's crazy.
Yeah. Well, I think you hit a good point when you talked about people not having the time or not making the time. I think that's really one of the key points here is, they've got so used to, people have gotten so used to, everything is about saving time to do something else, right? That's where we start. It's kind of crazy, but, if I can just throw 2 cups of kibble in the dish in the morning and that's all I have to do, versus, right?
Yeah.
Going to the store, buying it, or if you're preparing it or whatever, right? Then it's quicker. So that's what I'm going to do. And everything is about speed, right? Everything is about saving time. But this is the problem. Saving time for what? People are they're running with their heads cut off these days, and they don't know where they're going. And sometimes they get to the end of their life and they look back and they realize they've been duped, They never had what they should have had. What is life about? Life is about family and friends.
Right.
And spending time together, yes, enjoying, look, everybody should have, a garden, right? If you got a little piece of land, you should put some plants out there. I'm not saying it's for everybody, but most people, you can grow your own vegetables, you put some effort into it,